You've connected to Cisco Unplugged.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cisco Unplugged. I'm Dan Klamert, your host, and this week in episode 57, we are going to be discussing wireless Meraki cloud best practices. We've done a lot of best practice sessions for the on-prem solution, and a lot of times these best practice sessions are some of our most popular and most requested sessions. So we're very excited here to bring a cloud version of this. And actually, it's part of a two-part series. So today will be part one. We'll talk a little bit higher level. And for those that may not be real familiar with the cloud Meraki solution, we'll go through some higher level stuff. If you are familiar with it, I think you'll still pick up some good tidbits here today as well. But so with that, I'd like to welcome back to the show, Al. Hey, how are you doing, Al?
Hey, good, good. Looking forward to this. So just a bit of insider information. We started this conversation with David, and he came to us with like a 2-day seminar. There was so much good material. So he spent the last while kind of partitioning this up into two different sessions. So to get to this point, he's done a lot of culminating of different material and stuff like that. So this should be a great session. Really looking forward to it.
And speaking of Dave, so I'd like to welcome our special guest here today to the show, Dave Scott. He's a solutions engineer here in the New York, New Jersey area. Welcome, Dave. How are you doing?
Thanks. Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to the session. Like Al said, if you let me, I'll talk about this stuff all day long. Yeah, coming up on 20 years at Cisco and 10 years as a Meraki solutions architect. So excited to talk about some of this. It was actually difficult to distill everything down, but we have a pretty good set of best in common practices that I think will resonate well with anyone who's either just getting started with the Meraki dashboard or who's already been using it for a while.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. So before we get going here, just a couple reminders for our viewers here. So we, as always, will be taking questions via Slido. So if you do have questions, you can join via the QR code on the screen. You can join via the link in the YouTube, below the YouTube video that you're watching now. There's a passcode there to enter that. I am monitoring the YouTube chat as well. So sometimes we get some questions that come in via there as well. So I'll be monitoring that. So if you do have questions, feel free to lob those in and we'll do our best to address those here live, either on the show or directly via Slido. So, and as a reminder, we are live and recording this, and it does stream after the fact to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@getunplugged. So I would encourage you to go out there. And like I mentioned, this is part one of a two-part series. So if we do have a new page out there, there's a link right below the description on the channel page of the home page that pulls up our schedule here. You can click on that. It says schedule, and you'll see now the next coming couple of months here of episodes that are on the docket. So I'll do a reminder at the end as well about that, but it's right there as the top link on our YouTube channel. So excited about that. But with that, I think we're ready to get into it here. So let's get unplugged. Dave, let's talk a little bit more about cloud best practices. And I think, you talked about higher level. I think we're going to start with like dashboard structure, maybe around orgs versus networks. How does that work? Those
Right.
types of things. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Let me know if you're seeing my screen share. Okay.
We are.
Yeah.
All good.
Okay, great. So yeah, let's jump right into the Meraki dashboard here and talk about organizations and networks. Essentially, a collection of networks is what makes up an organization, and each network is essentially a configuration container. And also typically a network is synonymous with a physical location, a site or a building or even a campus. This is why we see both an organization menu locale, where we have org-wide things across all the networks, and we also have a network-wide menu locale for things that are specific to this one network. The easiest way to think about this is in the concept of a K-12 school district, right? Let's call it Hamilton Township.
Mhm.
That would be the organization. And then all of the, let's say, 35 different elementary, middle, and high schools would each be their own individual network. And then they would, in turn, all of those networks make up the organization. So when I come to the organization overview page, which is the one that we're already looking at here, I have a world map, and so I have a global view of my entire organization and all the networks that are in it, and I have a handy flex table. So there are a number of best and common practices that exist with just using the flex tables themselves in the Meraki dashboard. There are a number of self-maintaining databases and self-maintaining spreadsheets that are there for you to use. So in this case, I can see that I've got over 2,000 devices. In this particular org, these 2,200 devices exist in 121 different networks. So I can expand this flex table, and I can, sort and reverse sort on network type, for example, where I have combined networks, which simply means that I have multiple technologies combined, which is what we're looking at here, which is why you see I have a wireless menu locale. I've also got switches. I also have cameras and IoT sensors, for example. But I can also have a network that is just comprised of wireless access points, or just switches, or just firewalls. So you have a lot of flexibility with the way you want to break up your orgs into the various different networks and what those network types are. There's not necessarily any one best practice. It really comes down to administrative preference, with the best practice being that a network is synonymous with a physical location, a site. But that site could be one building, it could be an entire campus, it could be a small branch office. Also, the concept of tags is very important throughout Meraki. So throughout all of the cloud managed technologies, you can tag individual devices, and you can also tag entire networks. Tags are just arbitrary names, and they are for your administrative purposes. So I see, for example, here I have all these different tags. This is at the network level. I have 12 network tags. I could just type into this box, for example, like the word branch. Well, I have to spell it correctly. And so there's the branch. NCH. Okay, that helps. So there's the one branch, and I have 9 networks, and I have some client usage device information. If I click back over to the networks tab, well, first you'll notice that the world map has immediately updated to only show the sites where I have that branch tag deployed. And if I jump over to the networks tab, I see now that I have this list of 10 devices. Now, why were there 10? It only showed me there were 9 in the branch, because this is actually like a live grep command. And you'll notice that this one network name up here has the word branch in it. So if I want to eliminate that and really only look at the branch tag, these are actually clickable links in the tags column. By the way, I can turn lots of different columns on and off depending on what I want to look at. Or if I want to sort and reverse sort or search for something, I have various different columns that I can turn on based on which view I'm looking at. If I click on that branch tag, like I mentioned, notice that it automatically filled in the proper syntax for the search criteria that I happen to be using, the tag : branch. I didn't need to know about that. It just did it for me. So if I come back over to the entire flex table, and if I let's say, what's the most heavily used network that I have? Well, I can, let's say, reverse sort by usage. And here, no surprise, it's Meraki San Francisco Data Center, or there's SFO 12, which is actually our Meraki HQ in San Francisco. Now that I deleted that search term, you can see that the world map went back to the entire view. Now, if I want, I can also drill in, whereas I could just click on this Meraki SFO 12, I can also drill into this individually. And I can zoom in. Let me zoom in a little bit further. And I can also toggle on and off satellite view if I like, or I can upload maps and floor plans. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And I can zoom into any, this is obviously a mess because this is showing me everything over all the different floor plans. But I can hover over one of these APs, for example. Here's AP 6 on the 5th floor in Meraki HQ San Francisco. And I can click into that one. I have a live link. I can click right into that. Now I had it ready to go in this particular tab, just in the interest of time. And what I did, the cool thing here is that I went from a global view of an entire multinational organization right down into an individual access point where I can see the health information on that AP, which clients are actively connected, what channels is it operating on, what's the channel utilization look like in the different spectrums, historical health data, connectivity, and all the devices that have connected over the last day and how much usage they've shown me. And then I can even go further. I can drill into one of these individual devices, for example, and I can get into that specific client. And so again, I went from a global multinational view all the way down to a specific client where I can see where they're connected, how they're connected. I have blue dot on a floor plan type of location, really handy connectivity widget that is context sensitive, so that when I hover over different links between the AP and the switch, for example, I see context specific information along with clickable links to drill directly into that switch port. Or if I go further up in the chain, I can hover over a switch and see context specific information for the switch in terms of health information. Or on the AP, I get channel utilization information and connected clients. On this one specific client, I can do all kinds of interesting stuff that's beyond the scope of what we're really going to talk about today, like look at their network traffic footprint and what applications they're passing, what policy are they being subjected to, are they being subjected to any layer 3 or layer 7 firewall rules or traffic shaping, are they part of an adaptive policy group for microsegmentation, et cetera. I can also jump into things like roaming analytics or look at the timeline to see if have there been any poor roams, any optimal roams, for example. And I can trace the client's footsteps around the building over the course of a day. So I have a lot of flexibility here with all the rich information and actionable, intelligent information that the Meraki dashboard is bringing to the surface. One page that I skipped over there was the access points flex table. On the AP flex table, this is where you get to, if you just go to wireless access points, then you've also got a wireless overview page with some handy widgets that again give you some quick actionable information to drill down into problems that might be happening. You can also set up alerts for those problems as well, so you can be a bit more proactive about it. On the AP flex table, there are various different columns you can turn on or turn off. Like we talked about tags, and I can see that these are various different APs are tagged in different ways, but I can turn or off model number, serial number, et cetera. Maybe I'm not as interested in the tags themselves, so I can turn that column off. And I can reverse sort here by clients with usage and pick out the most heavily loaded AP in the entire network very quickly, or power source, or the Ethernet 1 column in this case. So I can sort and reverse sort by these. So maybe I can immediately pick up on an AP that should be connected at multi-gigabit, but maybe it's only connected at 100 meg for some reason. There's a wiring issue on a patch cable. Very quick and easy to pick out those kinds of things, as well as power source. If I happen to, maybe I have an AP that's only running in low power mode and it's unexpected. And because it's in low power mode, maybe I've lost some spatial streams on a high-end AP. So it's very handy to just leverage the flex table itself as a very a best and common practice to do so. So let's see, where were we? We already looked at an individual client, and on the AP itself, we were looking at the summary page before. I jumped over to the device health page here, which is also very handy to look at. Shows your CPU, memory, any reboot information, power modes, etc. And so I wanted to show you what it looked like when you drill into an individual AP, as well as when you drill into an individual client. There's a lot more that we could talk about on those pages, but we want to move on to some best and common practice type stuff. So on this one, this is again off of that AP summary page. We looked at summary, we looked at device health. You can look at timeline and connections, and you have all kinds of tabs we can look at here. On the performance tab in particular, this is where you can look at this over the last day, the last week, the last month. You can go back in time, and I can filter this down by specific SSIDs and or just specific bands. If I want to just focus in on maybe my new 6 gigahertz band that maybe I just recently started using. And I can look at the usage, the clients that are connected, signal quality, and I can look at this from different perspectives with respect to, say, RSSI versus actual signal to noise ratio, as well as utilization, the data rates that I'm seeing, et cetera. What's nice is that I can look at this for each individual access point. I can also look at this holistically across the entire network, across all the access points, and I can do this over the same time frame. Now, another relatively new best and common practice is there's a relatively new page in the Meraki dashboard. If you haven't seen it yet, under organization.
Let me jump in just for a second, because we're moving like at warp pace, which is great. I just want to make sure that everybody that's able to kind of follow along a little bit. So Basically what we started at the high level at an organization, a mapping and overview. You talked about tags. One of the things you showed when you went to the APs was that APs have multiple tags. Would you consider that to be sort of a best practice?
Yes. So right down here on this particular AP's page, here's the tags section. And I don't have write access in this network because this is Meraki HQ corporate. So otherwise I would have a little pencil icon here where I can edit the tag names. And you can assign these tags. They're completely arbitrary. So I can, here I see, obviously I've got Meraki Guest and Meraki Corp. It is a very common practice to use multiple tagging schemes on your access points. And I could also, for example, tag these as being on the 4th floor versus the 5th floor, or which IDF closet they might be wired back to, or if they serve a specific function. If they're indoor versus outdoor is another best practice way to tag your access points, indoor versus outdoor. If I have some APs where I have a pocket of where maybe I have band steering enabled or not, or if I'm only using 6 gigahertz in a particular area, then tag it accordingly. So they can have multiple arbitrary tags. They can be anything you wish, really, for administrative purposes. On that
So
AP
really
flex table,
yeah, that's really key to being
being
able to sort out APs, quickly find things. Is sort of like as good as your tagging infrastructure is, that's how good you can sort things and find things quickly, especially in a large organization, sounds like.
Exactly. Now, again, I don't have write access on this network. If I did, I would have a bunch of little individual checkboxes over here. So what I could do is I could select or mass select multiple APs, maybe just a subset. You know, maybe I only want to find my CW9170 series, my Wi-Fi 7 APs only, and here's 92 of them out of what there might have been 160 some. I could mass select all of these and then drop down a little tag drop down and assign them new tags or remove tags from them in mass. So very, very handy and also very common practice to do that with your tagging. So the sky's the limit on how you want to how you want to handle the way you're doing your tagging.
And then just kind of from we've been just a recap, right? So we went through that. We talked about the org. We talked about the wireless. He went into the APs, and then you drill down on an AP, and you went through the various options of things that you can do on the AP, and that's where we were seeing things like AP performance and that sort of stuff. So we just organization. We went to wireless, and then we went to APs, and then under the APs we went to those sub menus. So I mean, is that my final one? Okay, all right, good.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so on this org summary page, this is where you can have a quick glance across every network in your organization along with their health scores and if they might be trending up or down. And we can examine this over the last 2 hours, the last day, the last week, or a custom range over the last week. And as you might expect with any flex table in the Meraki dashboard, this is fully searchable and sortable. So I can reverse sort on the health score, for example, and pick out any problematic networks. The health score itself is really just it's a single composite number based on various triggers and thresholds and accounts both for clients and the infrastructure devices themselves. So this is just to give a quick indication, an easy way, for example, to jump straight to a network that might be trending poorly over the last day or over the last couple of hours. Now, before we jump into some of the wireless specific best practices, since this is more a high-level session, let's take a peek at some org-wide administrative tasks and the best practices associated with those. Again, like I mentioned, the Meraki dashboard has multiple self-maintaining databases that help save you time and simplify operations. And one of them is the inventory page. So this is all the stuff we're going to look at over the next couple minutes is all under this organization menu. And what we're looking at here is the organization inventory page. So you can, again, turn various different columns on or off, depending on what you wish to look at. And this is a one-stop inventory shop for my entire organization. It's a self-maintaining spreadsheet for every piece of equipment that I own in this org. Its serial number, MAC address, its name, the network it's deployed into. And I can rearrange and sort and reverse sort. And again, let's say I only want to find... in this case, I did the CW9170 because I want to find all of my Wi-Fi 7 APs, but I can search this by various other different criteria or what's its deployment status, right? Is it deployed or is it currently available and just sitting in my inventory? So if I only want to find my my 9176Is, I can even search by serial number because the first 4 characters of a cloud ID identify the actual product. But if you didn't know that and I want to just type in CW9160, I can find all of my Wi-Fi 6E access points very quickly and easily. The other thing is on the licensing page. Again, another self-maintaining spreadsheet that you'll have under the organization license info. I have a single page that shows my licensing model, what I'm licensed for, and my current consumption. Meraki has multiple licensing models, including subscriptions and enterprise agreements. This model happens to be the original co-termination model. So there's a single co-term date across every device in my organization. And depending on the product, sometimes there are different license tiers. For wireless, which shows up here under the MWAR product edition, you can have either enterprise or advanced, which is equivalent to what you might also call essentials or advantage. And the advanced wireless license has everything in enterprise, plus it brings in things like AI RRM, intelligent packet capture, and things like adaptive policy, which is inline security group tags for microsegmentation. This is also a self-maintaining database, so there's never any guesswork. I could click on an individual license key here and say on this date and time when this license key was applied, this was the exact licensing state of my organization. Another org-wide construct is the changelog. So this has this is a self-maintaining immutable spreadsheet of every change that was made by every admin across every network. And I can even see the old value and the new value, and even what page on the dashboard they were looking at when they made that change. This is also fully searchable, sortable. I can also actually check the box here for changes made via API, in which case I'll actually see the put command. I see the API endpoint that was exercised and what was the old value, what was the new value, going back and forth. So very powerful to have this changelog and to use it. And you can also load more changes. In this case, I got several thousand changes that go back to January, but I can also simply load more changes and go back even further in time.
Quick question on the previous slide where you show the licensing. Is there a best practice around licensing? You know, you showed co-term. I think there are different ways to do licensing, you know, a la carte or the subscription. Is there any sort of a best practice around there or recommendation?
No, it really comes down to customer preference, whether or not. So some customers know and love this co-term model, which was the original licensing model. And in the very early days, it was the only one available, where everything co-terminates to a single date and it's spread across every piece of equipment that you own and whatever licenses you purchased. Subscriptions is really more the way to go for some customers who want a bit more flexibility and sophistication with how they want to deploy their licensing. So I would urge customers to either go in the direction of subscriptions and or enterprise agreements, but you still have this co-term model available. If that works for you, and if that is the customer's preference, you can stick with co-termination. Or we could call it subscription, where everything has a single co-terminating date, the entire organization and everything in it co-terminates. So yeah, no one best practice on that. Really comes down to customer preference.
Gotcha. Thank you.
On the summary reports, looks like we're about halfway through. Summary reports, again, best in common practice. In this case, I can look at the last day, week, month, or a custom range that can go all the way back up to 2 years. So I could do month to month comparison from 1 year to the next, for example. In this case, I'm just looking at this wireless network, but I can view any single network. I can look at the entire org, or again, back to tags, I can look at any at a conglomeration of all networks that are tagged with a specific tag, like maybe just my branch offices. In this case, it's a single network. I can also then look at just the devices that are tagged with maybe the Blizzard tag. I can look at individual SSIDs. In this case, it's Meraki Corp and my top 5 results. So I can see top clients, top operating systems, et cetera, top devices that are used, and get some usage graphs and some other useful data. I can export this. I can also customize the report if I want to turn certain pieces of the report on or off. And I can also schedule this to be emailed to me on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So absolutely best in common practice to leverage that, customize them, and send them to yourselves on a periodic basis. And then we also have to get into firmware. The way we do firmware management, On this overview page, I can see all of my current GA stable firmware. The stable tab is pre-selected. And I can also say what's out there that might be a stable release candidate at the moment, or what beta versions might currently be available. I also have complete access to the release notes. So if I go into the MR release notes here, I can go forward and backward in time to look at the different versions, and I can see what bug fixes, any important notes, new features, any known issues that might still exist. And I can also go forward into the beta versions and see what maybe new features are coming if I decide I want to try something. So it's nice that I can access all the release notes here without ever having to leave the Meraki dashboard environment. The other thing you'll notice is that I have a little summary up here of the most recent changes and anything that might currently be scheduled. If there was something scheduled, I have a little calendar icon where I could go in and maybe reschedule it or cancel it. You'll also notice version limits here. Sometimes you might have equipment in your Meraki network. It might be older equipment and it might hit what we call a maximum runnable firmware. If that happens, that's okay. You can still run that equipment. And on the back end, the Meraki dashboard will automatically have your network running the configured firmware version, but you might have a piece of legacy equipment or a batch of legacy equipment. It will automatically run its maximum runnable firmware automatically. There's no special arrangements you need to make. The back end handles that for you. It also gives you some status warnings here for the anything that's warning or critical. And if I jump over to the scheduled upgrades tab, again, I get a flex table and like there's a critical one. So maybe, for example, I only want to see my access point, and maybe I'm only interested in, let's say 31151, for example. So I'm going to just come down here and I'll look for 31151. My flex tables automatically adjusted. I see I have all these warnings because there's a newer firmware available. So I could mass select these and schedule an upgrade. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this was because I can say, okay, I'm going to go, instead of the latest stable, I'm going to go to the beta version, or whatever it is. When I click next, here I have minimize upgrade time and minimize client downtime. So generally speaking, the best practice is to always run the latest GA firmware, unless you're directed by Meraki support, for example, to run a specific lower version, maybe to avoid a specific known bug, for example. The other critical best practice is to always have a staging and or a dev or an engineering environment to validate new firmware prior to deployment into production. Now, with these two options, you can minimize upgrade time, which will be disruptive, and reboot all APs into new firmware without regard to if and where clients are connected. So you can expect some disruption in connectivity, but it'll happen fast. The more common and best practice, though, since most deployments have perpetually connected stationary devices, even on the Wi-Fi, is to use the minimize client downtime option, which means the overall upgrade time window is going to be a bit longer, but it's going to be far less disruptive to any connected clients. So with adequate AP placement and RF coverage, we can provide you with a relatively hitless wireless firmware upgrade mechanism. So just wanted to show that off as well. One last thing at the organization level, it goes without saying, but this is under the organization settings page. It goes without saying, and again, it's not wireless specific, but certainly a best and common practice to use two-factor authentication, password complexity requirements, account lockouts, and idle timeouts. One thing in the Meraki dashboard here you'll notice is the login IP ranges. So down here, I can optionally do this for the admins as well as for API. So if, for example, you want to first force your admins to VPN into your internal environment and only then be able to access the Meraki dashboard when coming from your public IP range, you can configure that both for logins and for API access. All right, let's take a peek at maps and floor plans. So you'll find this under the network-wide. This is not org level now, this is network specific. And under network-wide maps and floor plans, you'll have this page where it's absolutely best and common practice to upload your own floor plans into the Meraki dashboard. You can size and shape them and rotate them right here in the Meraki dashboard over top of a Google map for proper scaling. And not only does it allow you to do things like blue dot placement of client devices, but from an administrative standpoint, you can easily click into a specific floor of a particular building. Here we're looking at SFO 12. I could just as easily click the second floor here as opposed to the third floor. And I can also look at this over, again, satellite view or map view. I can choose which floor plan I want to look at. I can adjust the opacity back and forth. And if I want to maybe, let's turn off the cameras and the sensors. I'm only looking at access points. And then I can further refine that to say, what's the marker value? In this case, it's already preset for the device type. I see it's mostly 9178 access points, but I could look at the device names, how many clients are currently connected, or how many clients for the past day, right? Or what's the usage for the past day? So I can say done editing markers, and I can very quickly and easily pick out what's the most heavily loaded AP. Looks like this one right here, 631 clients on AP18 on the second floor over the course of the last day. Now, related to this is the client density heat map. Once you've uploaded your floor plans and you've sized and shaped and rotated them and you've placed your APs on them, by the way, if you use a tool like Ekahau or Hamina, it's a very common and best practice to do your predictive site survey in a tool like that. And then you can import that into the Meraki dashboard and it will auto place the APs on your floor plan. So that's also pretty cool and powerful feature. So you don't have to repeat all that work to do your AP placement. But the other thing I wanted to show off here was the client density map, where I have a particular floor plan, and I can look at this over the last 5 minutes or over the last 24 hours or anywhere in between, and I can hit a playback button and get an idea of how the clients moved around and what was the client density over a period of time and how that changed throughout the day if I want to do a little bit of capacity planning. All right, just a few more tabs to look at here. I know we're going at warp speed, like Al said. On the wireless SSIDs page, the best practice is always to minimize the number of SSIDs. This is obviously an exception, since this is also a dev, test, and an engineering environment out in Meraki HQ in San Francisco. So please do not configure 10 or 15 SSIDs. Minimizing the duty cycle of each channel, which is maximizing the usability of the spectrum, is key to improving performance. The figure of merit here is channel utilization, and anything you can do to reduce it is going to improve performance, especially in a high density environment. So we reduced the number of SSIDs to decrease the impact of beaconing at lower data rates and minimize the response process that occurs on probes from the client, from all the clients, because yeah, go ahead.
Let's chat just a little bit about, because you've kind of touched on the concept of network and organization. And now we're getting into sort of SSIDs. The SSIDs are on a per network basis, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So this can vary across various different networks. You also have the ability to do configuration templates, in which case you would configure this at an org level for a template, and then you would bind different networks to the template. Now you can also use API to do that. And so I'll caution you to say that configuration templates are very powerful, but they can also be inflexible. And that's where API comes in to close that gap. Because if I make one change to the template, that will propagate down to every network that is bound to that template. But then I might want some local configuration stickiness for specific sites. And that's where you just need to be careful not to paint yourself into a corner with config templates. But yeah, absolutely. These SSIDs exist at the network level.
So a question then around that, in the spirit of less SSIDs or minimizing the number of SSIDs then. So if I've got, people coming to me and say, hey, this old device needs its own SSID or whatever. And yeah, so maybe that's true, maybe that's not, whatever. Let's just pretend in this case it is. So then do we have the ability to isolate that SSID to like a location or specific, where that device might be, so I don't have to like propagate that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we call it SSID availability. So the key thing there, Dan, is that probes from the clients are robustly modulated and at the lowest mandatory data rate and at high power across all the channels. So in high density deployments, the impact of all the beacons and probes can become a significant problem. Each SSID requires separate beacons, and it's going to beacon at the lowest mandatory data rate, et cetera. So of course, things are a bit different in 6 gigahertz since we have that reduced set of only 15 preferred scanning channels every 80 megahertz apart. And there's also out-of-band discovery with the reduced neighbor reports in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So there's a little bit less of a concern with SSID sprawl in 6 gigahertz, but still, best in common practice, limit the number of SSIDs. Like you might have internal, BYOD, and guest, for example. So on the SSID availability page, if you have a need for, let's say, 5 or more SSIDs, then the best practice is to consider the use of tagging. Again, you tag your access points, the individual devices, and you use SSID availability. This allows you to assign the tag to the APs, and then with the SSID availability settings, you can broadcast certain SSIDs on a subset. So instead of enabling this SSID on all access points, I say only on some, and only the ones that maybe have the guest tag. And then I can also even say only during certain times of the day. So I can, maybe choose a template of like 8 to 5, but then I can modify that, or I can change things here, or I can also use inverse logic and say it's going to be unavailable during particular time of the day. So an example here might be that I'll use a K-12 example again. I might want to broadcast my guest SSID in the gym for wrestling matches, in the auditorium for school plays, and in the main lobby for parents coming and going. But I don't want to advertise my guest SSID in all the classrooms or in the library, for example. So very common and best practice to use your SSID tags and availability. And then this also means that I don't need to have every AP broadcasting every SSID all the time.
And this was directly under the wireless menu to get to this SSID availability?
Yeah, this is all under wireless. So this again is network specific, and where I have firewall and traffic shaping, splash page, I've got SSID availability, and that's where we control that. So I think we're down to the last 5 minutes or so here. So in the interest of time, I would just show quickly the access control page. This is where you get to when you're looking at wireless access control. If you're back on the SSIDs page, this is also where you would get if you click the edit settings off of access control. So on this page, this is where we can control whether the SSID status is on or off. If we hide it, again, best in common practice, do not think of this as a security mechanism. Hiding the SSID is not for security. So don't make that mistake. Let's say we're talking guests, right? So it would be open. And I would maybe have a click-through splash page, for example. And then down here, I can choose to run these in NAT mode, in which case the clients themselves are layer 2 isolated from one another, and the Meraki AP actually becomes the NAT boundary and the DHCP server, and the clients will get a seemingly random 10/8 address and be isolated from one another. I can also optionally turn on content filtering in NAT mode. But since we're talking best practices here, if it's a high density environment and I have lots and lots of guests, that's a lot of load on the AP and on the NAT tables, et cetera. So in that case, the best practice might be to actually leverage a DHCP server, an actual DHCP server, and bridge these to a particular VLAN, and get them onto an actual guest VLAN as opposed to letting the AP do all of that work.
What would happen if you did go to tunneled or or without the DHCP, the internal DHCP server?
Yeah, so you do have the option to do tunneled mode, and in that case, I can VPN tunnel data to a concentrator, and I can also do Ethernet over GRE. And I noticed this one is showing up. I can neither confirm nor deny that there is an announcement coming up regarding Meraki Campus Gateway. For large-scale wireless campus concentration. So stay tuned, Cisco Live coming up in a few weeks. You'll hear more about that. But you do have the options for different types of tunneling. I can also tunnel this back to a Meraki MX appliance as well. That option's been around for a long time. So tunneled versus bridge mode, there are some trade-offs there with how you want to do that. But either way, you can do your seamless layer 3 roaming across a campus scale simply by checking this box.
And then with NAT, if you're actually doing NAT mode, how do you roam across NAT? Does that work?
Yeah, good point. So if this is with roaming, that's what you need to consider, because now if you're roaming in NAT mode, that's going to be a hard roam every time you move APs, because now you're talking through a different AP, different NAT boundary, basically a different gateway. So that is also something that's a key consideration, is that when you're in NAT mode versus bridge mode. Right here, bridge mode. So this is the best in common practice, is to leverage bridge mode and put them onto a guest VLAN for sure.
Hey, Dave, while we're on the topic here of kind of traffic and flow, that sort of thing, a couple questions here along those lines is, so with the controller and function, that control being in the cloud essentially here, or cloud management, I should say,
Right.
if I lose access to the internet for whatever reason, my, pop goes down, whatever,
Ah,
what sort of functionality do I have? Does my Wi-Fi, stay up, that sort of thing? And then I guess the second follow-up question would be around, where's the data going? Is it, is that traversing the cloud? Is that staying local on your network? That sort of thing.
right. So, yeah, couple of key questions. So, whether you have one AP connected to one switch and one firewall, or like a very simplistic branch office, or it could be, 10,000 APs on hundreds of switches across dozens of sites, same exact look and feel. The limiting factor is really just, your LAN, your WAN, and your direct internet access pipes with your ISPs. Now, each piece of Meraki equipment maintains a roughly 1 kilobit per second control plane connection to the Meraki dashboard. And that's over an AES 256 encrypted tunnel for command and control traffic only, config changes, firmware updates, and statistics collection, basically metadata.
Sure.
So no customer traffic traverses the cloud. So the customer data stays on the customer's network. So this is not Google Drive in that sense, since customers might think their data is hairpinning in and out of controllers in the cloud. No, this is truly controllerless. Every Meraki AP and every piece of Meraki equipment, cameras and switches too, is truly autonomous. It has all of its processing capabilities locally, and it can operate autonomously even if internet connectivity is down and there's no access to the cloud. Now that begs the question, like you asked, what if I lose internet connectivity? What if the internet is down? Right? Does my network go dark? Or what you lose is the ability to actively monitor and make config changes. However, I'd argue that during an internet outage, you're not going to be wanting to make active config changes or firmware upgrades during an actual internet outage. But during that outage, clients stay connected and traffic keeps flowing within that site. What you might lose, for example, is if new users are coming onto the network and they're unable to communicate with a radius server back in your data center or in the cloud, they won't be able to authenticate. Yeah. Authenticated clients will stay as is. In the same fashion, guests might not be able to see a cloud-hosted splash page, for example. But again, if that's during an ISP outage, there's no internet anyway. So even if you serve up a locally hosted splash page, which you could do, you're still not going anywhere beyond the local site if they're down hard. A related question there that you asked was, during an outage, what if it's a change that I made or a failed firmware update? Sure. Be aware that every Meraki device and AP has a dual partition NVRAM. So it always has its last known good safe configuration and its last known good firmware on a backup partition, and it can self-heal. And in the event that you made a config change and it gets cut off, or there was a failed firmware update and it cuts off a site, it can subsequently recover itself and come back up in the dashboard coming off of that backup partition. You also have access to what we call the local status page. So you can go to a local status page locally on that site and see connectivity information on the APs. You can even run a little throughput test and see channel utilization. If I know we're getting to the point where we're out of time, but I could show you that, or we could save that for episode 2, where I show you the local status page and how you can actually walk around and do your own little mini site survey.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I think that is worthwhile, but it's up to you what you think.
Sure. Well, so in the interest of time, we can do the local status page stuff because we're gonna on the second episode we're gonna get more into RF profiles and looking at the RF spectrum and that kind of stuff. So we can look at the
that can make sense.
The local status page in that episode. One last thing I would like to show. We were looking at the access control page, was also the firewall and traffic shaping page. It's probably one of the last things that I'd like to show here. Is that this is where we can control layer 2 LAN isolation. Like if we're in bridge mode, it's very simple to enable that so that they're actually blocked from each other at layer 2. Common in guest networks, But you also have the option to turn that on in bridged networks. But I can also control my layer 7 firewall rules here. Very simple to add. Again, anytime traffic is traversing a piece of Meraki equipment, we're layer 7 fingerprinting that traffic. So I could, for example, say I want to block all peer-to-peer traffic. So your BitTorrent and all these other various types of peer-to-peer traffic. I can also, let's say, for example, I want to block, let's go to social web and photo sharing, and I just want to outright block TikTok, for example. And maybe that's the heavy hitter. So I can grab this four-way slider and I can rearrange that because it's going to, like an ACL, it's going to do a top-down type of approach. There's per client bandwidth limit and per SSID bandwidth limit. Now, best in common practice here, right? I don't necessarily want to traffic shape per client down to a low value, especially in a high density environment. I can do that. I can say I want to say 10 meg per client. I can also go asymmetrical by clicking on the details button here. And I can also optionally enable speed burst, which will allow the system, it'll allow clients to burst to 400% of the configured value for up to maybe, I think it's 5 seconds at a time. But still stay within the overall limit over the course of several minutes. So you can do that. But again, best in common practice is to leave this actually at unlimited in a high density environment. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, but the point is that I want clients to get on the medium, move their frames, and get off the medium as fast as possible. So in a high density environment, unlimited is actually a best in common practice, even though that might be counterintuitive to have unlimited per client bandwidth. The per SSID bandwidth, you need to be careful with, right? This is rarely used, but in places where it is, I might have a branch site with really limited ISP bandwidth, and maybe on a guest SSID, I'm going to want to shape this down and only allow them a little bit of bandwidth on the guest SSID, for example. That's where you would use per SSID. This is going to be applied on a per AP basis, by the way. So also just need to be aware of that. And then finally on the traffic shaping, I can enable the default rules. Again, best in common practice, enable the default rules. So the APs can assign these DSCP tags accordingly based on the traffic that's being passed. But then I can get more granular. I can add a new traffic shaping rule. And let's say, for example, I'm going to add, I'll do social web and photo sharing. And maybe because I'm not going to outright block it, because if you, especially I work with a lot of K-12 customers, if you outright block it, they'll find a way around it. So maybe I'm going to allow it, but I'm going to traffic shape it down. And I'm going to maybe, give this just a couple meg worth. And I'm also going to change the DSCP tag, and I'll maybe give this class selector 0 just for best effort. But then I'm also going to have, maybe I'm going to have some VoIP and video conferencing traffic, and I'm going to want that high priority. So I can come down here and do VoIP and video conferencing. And then I'm going to have that, I'll actually choose unlimited. So I'm going to ignore, have it unlimited, and I'll give this maybe assured forwarding multimedia conferencing with low drop. I'll give it AF34. And if that's also my more critical rule, I can grab rule number 3 and I can slide it up here to rule number 1, drag and drop, and I've rearranged because it does a top-down ACL type of match. How are we on time? I think we're just about out of time, right?
Yeah, I think we can wrap here soon, but go ahead.
Okay. Since we were talking guest networking, so one last topic then. On guest and splash pages. I think I had an example splash page over here. One other thing was on the client page, we talked about, I mentioned intelligent packet capture, but didn't show it. So on this particular device, I noticed that I can disconnect the client, so you can force disconnect sticky clients if you want. And I also have a packet capture here. So if I click that particular packet capture link, what it will do is it will take me over to the packet capture page, and it will pre-select that specific access point. It will pre-select the wireless interface, and it will also fill in automatically. I didn't have to do this. It fills in the TCP dump filter expression for that client's wireless NIC MAC address. And I could just as easily remove that. And let's say instead of save to cloud, I want to actually view the output live. And I'll just look for 6 seconds instead of 60 seconds, just for demonstration purposes, and start the capture. And I didn't have to set up any sniffers or span any ports or mirror anything. I just said, hey, dashboard, go capture traffic off of this AP. But then I say, oh, wait a minute. I didn't mean to capture. I don't want to see the 802.11 frames on the wireless interface. I want to see the Ethernet traffic on the wired side of the interface. So I simply flip that over to wired, click start capture again. And now I'm seeing the 802.3 traffic instead of the 802.11 traffic. But what's really cool is this proactive packet capture enablement. In the advanced wireless license, you do have the ability to turn on your proactive PCAPs, and then you'll have a number of stored captures here. So I can see, for example, I've got an invalid pairwise master key. I can view the report on that, for example, and see what's going on with that particular client and or access point, and get an idea, get some actionable information rather quickly. But I can also, if I go into stored captures, I can also bring up a Wireshark type view by clicking on the actual capture and seeing actual packet decodes, again, without having to leave the dashboard environment. I've got a full packet decode here. So pretty cool to also have and leverage the intelligent packet capture feature. And the client splash pages was the last thing, but I think we can maybe save that. If we're out of time, we can save the splash page stuff for episode 2. But let me know. We can go through this.
Yeah, let's save that for episode 2.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're at the point where we're sort of, there's a lot of material we just went through. Like I said in the beginning, when Dave came to us, it was like a 2-day seminar. We were trying to figure out how to squeeze it into 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's tough.
So,
it's tough.
Great stuff.
Really good. Really good.
good.
Thank you very much, Dave. This has really been good. And we're looking forward already here to episode 2. So like I mentioned, we have on our YouTube channel, Unplugged, or I should say youtube.com/@getunplugged. You can see the link there. It's the top link now underneath the show description, where you'll see our schedule of upcoming episodes. So spoiler alert, the part 2 is not the next episode. So we go to a different episode. Then we've got the exciting conclusion of this series here next after that. So go out there, check that out, and be sure then to, when you're out there, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You will get then notified when we do go live with other great content here. But you probably have determined the time when we're going live every other Wednesday here otherwise. But and then of course all this is out there on our YouTube channel for you to go and watch at your leisure. But if you do want to contact us as well, there is some contact info out there on the YouTube channel. You can get a hold of us there via one of those links via direct message, or you can send us an email at getunplugged@cisco.com. Also, you can always contact your Cisco account team. They know how to get a hold of us as well. Have them reach out. But thank you. I think that's it here. I don't see any other questions. So looking forward to the next episode, part 2 here. But until next time, thanks, Dave and Al, and stay connected and unplugged.
Thanks.
You, Dan.